Shalom, shalom. Thank you for being here. Truly, thank you for being part of this virtual community and for your attention once again. This is journalist Abel Flores, and you are welcome to this free course on the Mishnah, that legendary book that is the key to biblical interpretation, nothing more and nothing less. Also, remember to share this teaching and course, which, as I said, is free with your fellow believers, in your community, and with anyone you think might be interested in these biblical and metaphysical studies. Because the oral law is the soul of the scriptures, it comes from infinity and is beyond matter, which is why its writing was prohibited for centuries. The Bible, that collection of books that so many people venerate and often have under their arm or open to a page in their living room, is a version of the written law, the body of the Torah, but it has a soul or oral tradition, which is captured in the Mishnah. Today we are preparing to hold a class introducing the first section of the Mishnah, which has 6 sections or orders, in Hebrew, Sedarim. We will be talking about the first Seder, which is called Zeraim or seeds today. By the way, I remind you that we are already teaching on our channel about the first book of the Seder section of the Mishnah. We are already teaching about the tractate of Berakhot, Blessings, where this week we have already broadcast class 5 with Mishnah teaching 5 of chapter 1, thus concluding the first chapter of Berakhot. Next week we begin with chapter 2. If you haven't seen our introductory video to the Mishnah yet, I urge you to go to our video playlist on our YouTube channel and look for that first class, where we give a general introduction to the Mishnah and explain what oral tradition is and its importance in the spirit of the biblical text. Because today we're not going to introduce the Mishnah in general, but specifically to its first section, as I already told you at the Seder of Zeraim, which means seeds in Hebrew. And the first book of Zeraim, or seeds, is precisely Berakhot, Blessings. That's why we begin the course with that first tractate. Now, let's get down to business. Have you ever faced an instruction manual so extensive, so complex, and so contradictory that it seemed like it was written by a dozen bureaucrats competing to see who could be the most cryptic or secretive? Well, the Mishnah wasn't written by bureaucrats, but by sages. The funny thing is that often, the result is almost the same, at least for the ignorant or unversed like us. Before continuing, we invite you to subscribe to our channel, like this video, and share it with those who seek to understand the world from a different perspective. Thank you for being part of this community that doesn't settle for the superficial, the Abel Code community. With special thanks to my speaker, journalist Abel Flores.
The Mishnah, a text from the year 200 AD, compiled by Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi. It is called the Oral Law, although it was written. One of those ironies that only religious thought can allow with complete naturalness. The Mishnah presents itself as the basis of the Talmud, but in reality it is a legal, spiritual, and ritual universe that needs its own GPS to
Avoid getting lost along the way. Divided into 6 orders. Why 6? Why not 5 or 7? We don't really know, but some interpreters explain that 6 refers to the days of creation, because by writing the oral law, the sages were reinterpreting the oral laws called Mishnah and were creating a new Judaism, reforming it, because otherwise it would have been lost. Many Orthodox Christians dislike this interpretation that Mishnaic Judaism is a reinterpretation of Second Temple Judaism, but remember that the perspective of this course of these classes is an academic one, where all arguments, as long as they are based on history, archaeology, and even philosophy, I didn't say philosophy, but philosophical, as in the discipline that studies ancient texts, are accepted because they teach us the context of a period about which not as much is known as for. Example, the Middle Ages, where writing through the printing press already provides us with more information. But what we do know is that each order has a theme, an obsession, a kind of obsessive attention syndrome applied to the life of a people now persecuted, landless, and with a religion or culture that, if applied, put people at risk of death. Because the Romans had already decreed in the 2nd century that circumcision, Torah study, and Shabbat were customs punishable by death. Now we're going to explain the 6 orders or Sedari that make up the Mishnah, which is why we say it's more than a book, an encyclopedia with various classifications, sections, and volumes. First, Zeraim, seeds, agricultural laws, tithes, blessings. Everything revolves around how to harvest, what to mix, to whom to give what portion, and in what order. Oh, and a treatise on prayers. Because, of course, who doesn't think about blessing food while calculating percentages for Levites and priests? But here's the juicy bit. Of the 11 tractates in Zeraim seeds, only one has a Babylonian Gemara, Berakhot blessings, which is precisely the first. That's why I've already told you that we begin this course with Berakhot blessings and the Shema, which is the most important commandment of Moses. The rest of the tractates in this Seder, or order, are not written in the Talmud, specifically in the Gemara. There's a mysterious silence. The Babylonian Talmud, that monster of analysis, decided that the seeds could wait. There are no Gemarot or rabbinic discussions of these books, only of Berakhot blessings, as I already told you, only of the first. Why? We'll find out at some point. The earth is a receiver, but prayers are not sown in the ground, they are sown in the heavens. Now, the next order or Seder. Second, mode, which is a very profound Hebrew word, is sometimes translated as a biblical feast, as a holy convocation, but it's like a cosmic time. A time marked by the Sabbath, festivals, fasts. Basically, everything marked by the Hebrew calendar, but with rules so detailed they even tell you what not to do during a half-feast. Pilgrimages, half a shekel for the temple, and how to make a hut or sukkah that won't collapse on you during Sukkot. All perfectly documented, in case you were thinking of improvising. Third, Nazim. Women. The name says it all. Marriage, divorce, vows, Levirate marriage. Yes, that beautiful concept where if your brother dies childless, you marry his widow. Romantic? No. Legalistic? Absolutely. 7 treatises to make it clear that the marital bond is more a dynastic contract than a love story. Fourth, Nezikin. Damages. Civil and criminal law. Damages, property, commerce, courts. Here we enter the realm of who owes what to whom. And also the Sanhedrin, the Supreme Court, which in theory dispensed justice, and in practice, well, too. Sometimes. It includes ethics of the fathers, which is the spiritual supplement to keep your inner lawyer from getting the better of you. Fifth, Kodashim. Sacred things. Sacrifices, offerings, description of the temple. This is where everything becomes theatrical because we no longer have a temple in Jerusalem. Animals, flour, blood, exact measurements, purification instructions, a true script for a liturgical drama. But be careful, because even the smallest mistake could make you liable for desecration. Ideal for those who like ceremonies with existential risk. Sixth, Taharat. Purities. Ritual impurities of people, food, utensils, houses. The order of the scrupulous. Here every drop of impurity counts. And the process of becoming pure again isn't exactly quick. In fact, some treatises could compete with industrial cleaning manuals. By the way, a new chiddush or teaching, Zeraim are seeds, and the first seed is the blessings, the prayers, the reading of the night and morning Shema. Why? Because prayer is a seed that you are sowing in the heavens, and at some point you will see its fruit, even if you don't see it in life. Hopefully, if we all see our prayers materialize in life, even if you don't see it in life, every prayer will bear fruit at some point. The most important thing about this treatise is precisely this. The most important seeds are not the physical ones, the ones that bear fruit, but the seeds or Berakhot, spiritual blessings. Because, as we have already explained in the 4 worlds, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, the spiritual worlds, which are the heavens in the plural, are the origin, the source of everything that happens on earth, which is nothing more than a receiver or vessel for the higher or spiritual worlds. Now, let's talk about what the Talmud lacks in these Mishnah texts, the Gemara, the analysis. That commentary that takes every line of the Mishnah and breaks it down into an endless soup of opinions. But surprise, the Babylonian Gemara didn't comment on the Seder or order of Zeraim seeds, except for Berakhot, or Taharat, except for Niddah. And the Jerusalemite or Jerusalem Talmud, well, it didn't finish Kodashim and barely touched Taharat. Result? An incomplete map. A universal Mishnah, but a selective Talmud. As if you had a dictionary where they only explained the words they found interesting. As you can see here, the Mishnah is complete because it is the soul of the Torah. For some, these Mishnaic teachings come from the time of Moses, for others from the time of Ezra and Nehemiah, from the rebuilding of the temple in Jerusalem.
But the Talmud, which is basically an exhaustive commentary on the Mishnah, is not complete. Not everything has been discussed. Why?
And most importantly, the Mishnah is a complete work that has survived to this day, including the surprising Baraitas, which are more Mishnaic from the same period as the Tana Yehuda Hanasi, but which did not enter the official classification. In other words, they are declassified teachings. For those familiar with the Gemara, you will know that the most heated discussions arise from references to these Berakhot, or, as I already mentioned, declassified Mishnayot. We'll cover this in future classes, and you'll begin to understand Judaism from the inside out. I promise. Now, we continue. An awkward question: what causes certain topics to be developed to the point of exhaustion and others barely touched upon? Spiritual priorities? Practical relevance? Or simply academic preference? No one can say for sure. But the effect is clear. The Mishnah proposes a complete universe, and the Talmud comments on it, occasionally. And yet, all of this continues to be studied today, every day, in yeshivo, in homes, in universities. Because beyond its complexity, its arbitrariness, and its silences, the Mishnah remains a compass. It doesn't always point north, but it forces us to think about every step of the way. Why begin a collection of religious laws with a treatise on agriculture? Why talk about seeds, land, tithes, and harvests before sacrifices or morality? Because in Judaism, the most earthly can also be the most sacred. And that's where Zeraim, the seeds, begins, the first segment or order of the Mishnah of the oral tradition. There are also other inherent ideas here, such as the people's connection to their ancestral land. The land of Israel strengthens the Jewish people. Although the Torah episode of the spies says it is a land that expels its inhabitants, that applies when these inhabitants do not keep the commandments, but when Israel keeps the commandments in its land. This connection multiplies the blessings to unimaginable heights. So when Yehuda Hanasi compiled the oral traditions, and at that time, as you know, there was no temple, it had been destroyed by the Romans, the first order or Seder he edited and proposed was that of Zeraim, so that you know that this people has a land. They are not a wandering people, and one day their people will return to their land. Zeraim means seeds. But of course, like everything in Jewish tradition, nothing is just what it seems. Here, the seeds are not only biological, they are spiritual, cultural, even ethical. Zeraim is the first order of the Mishnah. Why open with agricultural laws? Because the land is more than a piece of land. It is a covenant, a witness. And on that land, Israel lives, works, and connects with the divine. Although it covers technically agricultural matters, such as what to plant, when to harvest, and to whom to give a share, Zeraim raises a deeper idea. Production does not depend solely on human effort, but on obedience to a higher will. Therefore, the first topic in this order is not exclusively agricultural. These are blessings, because before sowing, one must acknowledge. Before taking, give thanks. Before using, bless. Berakhot deals with daily prayers, the blessings before and after eating, the Shema Yisrael, the Amidah. That is, the basic liturgy of connection with God. For Rashi, the central commentator, intention, kavana, is essential. It is not enough to repeat formulas. One must feel them. Ramban Maimonides, the rationalist, systematizes these blessings in his Mishnah Torah by origin, biblical or rabbinic, and by function. There is no improvisation here. There is spiritual structure. Then comes the tractate of Pia, the corner of the field. That portion that, according to Leviticus, you must not reap, because it belongs to the poor. But not as a humiliating alms, but as a right. Ramban Maimonides would say that this is tzedakah, justice, not charity. Here, sowing is not just producing, it is sharing. It is recognizing that the land gives, but not only to you. What is the difference between tzedakah, which literally means justice, and charity? Tzedakah is obligatory and charity is optional. Otherwise, it is the same, It is helping the poor, the needy, the widow, the orphan, and the foreigner living in your land, because all these are unprotected sectors of society. You must give them obligatory tzedakah, because charity is an extra, it is optional. If you don't understand or read Hebrew, you wouldn't be able to see this difference between the Hebrew words that the written Torah itself mentions. Then comes the tractate of Demai, an awkward tractate. What if you're not sure the tithes were set aside? Welcome to the world of religious skepticism. Rashi says this law arose because many farmers didn't observe the rules. The solution? Treat all questionable products as if they were problematic. Rabbinic caution at its finest. The tractate of Kilayim, forbidden mixtures. No planting wheat and barley together, no crossbreeding of animals, no wearing linen and wool fabrics, shatnas. A whim? No, it's explicit in the Torah of Moses. The medieval Rabbi Maimonides sees here a defense of the natural order, a call to respect the boundaries God established. Because even in biology, there are limits according to Scripture. The tractate of Shevi'it, the sabbatical year. Every 7 years, the land rests. No sowing, no harvesting, no trading. How then to survive? With faith, with the conviction that God will provide. Rashi, the exegete par excellence, points out that this commandment isn't just agricultural. It's a reminder of creation, of time, of the cycle we have no control over. Tractate Maser Sheni, the second tithe. This is not given, it is taken. To Jerusalem. And there it must be eaten in purity. A perfect excuse, Rashi would say, to encourage pilgrimages and keep alive the connection with the temple and the connection of the people living in the diaspora with the land of Israel. Tractate Challah, the portion of dough separated when baking bread. Although there is no temple today, this mitzvah lives on. Ramban Maimonides explains that even outside of Israel it is practiced as a remembrance. Because memory is not a detail in Judaism, it is a tool of identity. Tractate Orlah, the prohibition against eating fruit from a tree during its first 3 years. Here, the message is clear: patience. Discipline. Not everything that grows is ready to be enjoyed. There is a time for everything, and rushing is, literally, a sin. And finally, Tractate Bikkurim, the first fruits. The first fruits that were brought to the temple with a public declaration of gratitude. Rashi highlights the narrative aspect here. It's not just an economic act, it's an exercise in memory. The story of the Exodus is recited. Because giving the first fruits isn't just giving thanks, it's remembering where you come from. Zeraim, then, is not a technical manual on agriculture. It's a theology of the land. A spiritual treatise on work, generosity, faith, and memory. Because sowing, in Judaism, is much more than putting seeds in the ground. It's sowing justice. It's sowing gratitude. It's sowing connection. It's sowing petitions in heaven, which will bear fruit sooner or later. Tractate Terumot, the portions set aside for the Kohanim, the priests. Here it is established that a certain part of your produce must go to those who serve in the temple. And be careful, these portions are sacred. Ramban Maimonides will say that they may only be eaten in a state of ritual purity. Eating them while impure would be a desecration. That's how seriously they take it. Remember when in the first Mishnah of Tractate Berakhot it says that the night Shema is recited when the Cohen priest enters to eat his terumah? Well, this tractate is precisely about this terumah and the other tithes. Tractate Ma'aserot, tithes. The first is given to the Levites, that landless tribe that lives off religious service. Because yes, maintaining the spiritual also requires resources. Here, the tithe is a way to ensure that community service is not left without sustenance. Now let's delve deeper into this order of Zeraim and what mysticism, Kabbalah, says. What if I told you that behind every agricultural law of the Mishnah lies a cosmic secret? That every blessing over a piece of fruit, every corner of the field left unharvested, every tithe set aside, are not just ritual actions, but pieces of a profound spiritual mechanism, connecting the earthly with the infinite. It sounds mystical, because it is. Welcome to the Tree of Life. For Kabbalists, the Mishnah is not simply a manual of laws. It is a code, a mirror of the universe. Rabbi Moshe Cordovero, known as the Ramic, one of the giants of 16th century Jewish mysticism, affirmed that the 6 orders of the Mishnah not only regulate life, they reflect the earthly Shevi'it of the tree of life. And here we need to pause for a moment. What is the tree of life? It is the spiritual map par excellence in Kabbalah. It includes the 4 worlds we have already explained, Atzilut, Bria, Yetzerin, and Asiya, but it also adds the 10 Sefirot, the 22 Hebrew letters, and many other things. But this is the most fundamental. The tree of life is the map of the cosmos. They are the plans of the architect of the universe, and they are encoded in the cosmos, as in humankind itself. Every human being is a tree of life. That is the potential you have when created in the image and likeness of the Creator. A structure of 10 Sefirot, or divine emanations, that describe how the infinite, Ein Sof, unfolds to create and sustain the world. It is not a botanical tree. It is a metaphysical tree, with roots in the divine and branches in every aspect of human existence. Each Sephira represents a divine quality, Chesed, goodness, Gevura, strictness, Tiferet, beauty, Netzach, perseverance, Hod, humility, Yesed, foundation, Malchut, kingdom, and beyond, at the top, Chochmah, wisdom, Bina, understanding, and Keter crown. And now, let's return to the Mishnah. According to the Rabbinic, the order Zeraim, the first of all, is associated with the Sephira of Chesed, goodness. And this is no coincidence, because Zeraim is about giving, sharing, channeling, giving blessings, giving prayers, giving thanks, giving tithes, giving offerings, giving the corner of your field to the poor, giving tzedakah, giving charity, giving, and giving to infinity and beyond. Because giving is better than receiving, says the universe itself. When you say a blessing before eating, you're acknowledging that the food is not yours by absolute right. It is a divine loan. That is chesed, kindness. When you leave the corner of your field for the poor, the mitzvah of piyah, you are imitating God, who gives without expecting anything in return. That is chesed, kindness. When you separate Terumot and Ma'aserot, you're ensuring that the priests, Levites, and the temple, symbols of spiritual service, are sustained. It is purposeful redistribution. That is also chesed, kindness. But not all giving is chesed. Spiritual giving is different. It is not paternalistic charity. It is recognizing that one is a channel, not an owner. That one receives to share, not to accumulate. Therefore, Zeraim is not only the first chronologically, it is the first ontologically. On the tree of life, Chesed arises immediately after Chochmah and Bina, wisdom and understanding. First, the universe is conceived, then it is flooded with goodness. Likewise, first, the roots of thought are studied, and then seeds are sown with Zeraim. And here comes the disturbing part. If Zeraim represents Chesed, what do the other orders represent? What happens when we reach Nezikin, the order of harm, and connect it with Gevura, rigor? Or when we reach Kodashim, the temple sacrifices, and associate it with Tiferet, the harmony between Chesed and Gevura? We will see this in future classes. So the next time you separate a tithe, say a blessing, or set aside a portion for someone in need, remember, you're not doing a favor. You're aligning your life with the primary energy that sustains the universe. The Rabbinic Cordovero invites us to see that every law, every treatise, is a reflection of a divine energy. And by studying the Mishnah, we don't just learn rules, we align ourselves with the flow of creation. Studying Zeraim, then, isn't just about understanding how to divide your harvest. It's about activating goodness in your life. It's about opening the channel for the divine to flow through your daily actions. And if that sounds grandiose, that's because it is. Because Kabbalah doesn't come to simplify. It comes to make things more complex with meaning, to tell us that reality is deeper than it seems, and that a simple blessing over an apple can be a cosmic act if you do it consciously. Zeraim is the beginning. It's the first step on the tree. Because giving, in the spirituality of the Torah, is not one virtue among others. It is the foundation, the starting point. Everything else will come later: judgment, balance, persistence. But without goodness, there is nothing. Now we will conclude with the symbolism of each tractate of the Seder or order of Zeraim seeds. Berakhot, the power of the word according to the Sefer HaBahir. Blessing transforms reality. The blessing creates a channel for the Shafat, divine influence, to flow. To say, Bruk Ada, blessed are you, referring to God, is to connect Malchut, kingdom or land, with the higher spirit. Pia, the act of leaving a margin in Kabbalah, leaving a border unharvested, is to recognize that not everything belongs to us. It is to reserve space for the Shekinah, or divine presence. The Arizal says that Pia rectifies the Sephira of Malchut through humility. Demai, doubt in holiness spiritually, it represents the need to refine uncertainty, klipat noga, and elevate it to holiness. Kilayim, avoiding forbidden mixtures in mystical terms, it means not mixing incompatible spiritual forces. The Zohar warns that chaotic mixing disrupts divine order. Shevi'it, the sabbatical year. It symbolizes the 7th messianic millennium, when creation will rest and all labor will cease. Zohar Hadash, Ruth. The rest of the land is in alignment with the Siphon of Bina, the Sephira of understanding and freedom. Terumot and Ma'aserot, dedication of the first part, it represents the principle of giving the first fruits of our energy to the Creator, channeling abundance for the rest. Mazer Sheni, eating in Jerusalem, according to the Midrash Tanchuma, this mitzvah creates a union between the people and the Shekinah, the divine presence, by eating in purity. Challah, separating a portion of the dough the Zohar. 3. 184b, associates the challah, or a small piece of dough separated from the flour when making Shabbat bread, with nourishing the Shekinah, the divine presence, because bread is a symbol of spiritual sustenance. Orlah, forbidden fruit during the first 3 years mystically. The 3 years are the 3 kelipot, or impure husks, that must be refined before holiness can be revealed. Bikkurim, first fruits to the temple, it symbolizes the union of the Sefirot Yesod, channel, and Malchut, receiver. Bringing the first fruits is elevating the fruit of all our work to God. This concludes today's class. Thank you for coming here, listening, and thinking. Remember that starting next class, we'll continue with the Tractate of Blessings and begin Chapter 2. Remember to subscribe to our channel, give us a like, and share this video with your loved ones. Shalom.